So this is going to be the beginning of part 49. I just got done shooting the end of 48. What I've done is, while I'm waiting for that video to produce, I'm going to start tearing the pumpkin apart. I just pulled off these plastic things off of the 4 studs on the top. Not really even sure why they're there, but pulled them off, and I'm going to start pulling this apart to pull the pumpkin out. One of the things that I've got to do before I start pulling that pumpkin apart is I'm going to pull that drain plug in the back and see how much oil is in there. Because when I pull that thing apart, if there's still oil in there, it's going to be all over the place. But let me pull that apart and see if I can get as much out as possible before I pull that pumpkin off. So I drained as much of that oil I could out of that drain plug into that 5-gallon bucket, but it's not the low point of the pumpkin. So what I've done is put a little plastic tote type thing down underneath it, so when I break that apart, that rest of that oil will drain into that. What I did is broke them free using the long handled ratchet, 1/2-inch drive in the socket. Those nuts on the studs, those top 4 ones were really tight. The rest of them, definitely not as tight as those top 4. Gonna get an impact and I'll bring you back. I gotta tell you, that looked like there was a little water. There is water in the bottom of it. Glad I pulled this off. Get that water out of there. I'll get some good oil into it when this thing gets put back together. Not sure if I'm gonna get that. I'm back in here Monday morning, and I'm just going to pull this thing out. I don't have a feel for how heavy this thing is or how much of the rear end is going to come out. I'm assuming it's just the pinion gear, not the ring gear, but let me see. I've got it, tried to balance it. Tried to balance it on the transmission jack, but it's kind of a little awkward. And so the whole rim. So what I'll do, I guess what I'll do is try and I'll see if I can find a small little skid and try and put it onto the skid, and that way I can just put it in the back of the truck. Here's what I got. There's that rear end, the ring pinion gear pumpkin, let's call it, that I took out of that rear axle. I put it, mounted it on a skid, and I'm gonna just I'll pick it up with a forklift truck, set it up in the back of my truck, and take it down to Casey's, the salvage yard, and he's going to put a new front end on this that includes a parking brake for the truck. One of the benefits that getting it onto the front of the pumpkin is the parking brake will be there. So if something ever happened to the drive line, if it was mounted on the transmission or carrier bearing, if something ever happened to the drive line, you wouldn't have a parking brake. But with this way, you've got a parking brake. Unless you lost an axle, and if you lost an axle, you've got worse issues than a parking brake. But anyways, there it is. Okay, in the last chapter of the haul truck series, one of the things I discussed was trying to get these pins out of these springs. One of my viewers commented that I should try using an air chisel to do it. And ironically, when I had edited that last video and heard myself talking about that, had thought about that, trying to use a air chisel, kind of as you do to get ball joints to release out of it. So here we go. What I'm going to do is go on the back side, use the air chisel against the pin, and this is a pin right here. It's got that grease zerk in it. But anyways, here we go. Ironically, the other one that it's working on is the one that was the grease zerk was missing out of it, and it was all rusted up. So let me take you over to the other side and I'll show you that coming out. Maybe it was my imagination. Okay, we're back over to the driver's side, the side that I started on originally, and let me try to do that one again. End of the air hose broke. Didn't broke, it just don't shut off. Okay, another day. I'm back here the day after I tried the air chisel on it, and I'm over on the driver's side this time, and just using the hammer and punch on it, and I'm getting a little movement out of it. Not a lot of movement, but a little movement. And I guess I just got to keep working at it, trying to get it loose. And it's probably kind of like those shims wedges that were in the tractor tires, the 1066 tractor tires. It took me forever to get those wheel and tire assemblies off of the axle in the back because of those wedges were rusted in place. Again, you got to understand that this truck is 45 years old, and these things have probably never been out and got 45 years of rust and dirt and corrosion in there. I'll just keep working at it. Okay, so I got the driver's side out. I ended up driving it out backwards. And in the process, the I broke the Zerk off, but that's no big deal. What I'm going to do is put this in the parts cleaner. There's just a groove. I don't know whether you can see it. See the hole in there? That's where the grease comes out. I kind of figured that there would be a groove around it, but there's not. But anyways, I've got to disconnect. I got to get my drift pin back out of there. But I'll bring you back when I get it off. Of course, this thing has to fight me every step of the way. So I got the pin out, got this down, but there's another pin in here that kind of holds. Let's see if I can show it to you. That other leaf up above. Now, I can't get it up because it's kind of, this leaf up here is holding it up above. So what there was is that pin was held in by a cotter pin. Of course, the cotter pin broke off. And I couldn't punch it through. So I took a drill and drilled in there, and of course after a while the drill bit had to break off. So got to get that drill back out of there, got to try and get the remainder of that cotter pin out of there so that I can drive that pin out. But what the issue is, unlike this pin down here where I had a shot back and forth, the pin is actually above the frame rail. Now, they have provided a couple of holes there, but there's this braces in the way, so you really can't get a shot at it. So hopefully I can drive it back far enough into the brace and be able to get it out that way. But I can't drive it back until I get that drill bit and the rest of that pin out of there. I'll bring you back. So I just got back from the salvage yard, and here is the pumpkin out of the that new axle with the parking brake attached to it. So I've got that set. What I think I'm gonna do is take you over to the rear of the truck and show you what my intentions are as far as getting that rear axle in position. So here I am over by my toolbox and the wooden workbench. This is where the axle is now. This is where I tore the pumpkin out. But what I need to do is, what I'm thinking about doing is taking it and bringing it back over here behind the truck, so that what I would do is position it in here. I'd put it back together back here, move these jack stands up in front, and that way it'll be in position back here in place, and I can just slide it forward to once I get these springs off and cut. And again, I've probably already gone through the issues with getting the springs off, so not even going to get into it farther. At some point in time in a build, you've just got to say enough is enough. I had just gotten done shooting that clip about the rear end, and what my intention had been was to bring the rear end over here and stage it behind the frame, and bring the pumpkin back over here and put it in over here. Well, what I'm gonna do is, I have been I got the pin out that holds basically the leaf spring in there. That's a greasable pin that the spring really pivots on. I've got that out. I've got it cleaned up. I'm gonna clean up the bore of that spring, the bores of these things, get the pin back in there, get the grease zerk back in there, and do that. Gonna do the same on the other side. What my issue has been is there's secondary pins that are in here, and I'm having an issue getting them out. These secondary pins aren't pivotal, no pun intended, in the springs working. In other words, the spring rides up here until it gets compressed, and then it pushes down against this pin. This pin stops it from coming down farther. It's not pivotal in the way the spring works, and it's taking me, I'm not having any luck getting these things to move. They're not greasable, they're just pins that keep the spring from compressing down further on itself, let's say. I've got to bite the bullet here. At some point in time, you got to say enough is enough. I'm not going to try and get these pins out. I've told you the issue about the pin on the back side is buried into the frame rail. And there is an access port in there, but the port is kind of buried under that like 45 angled frame member that comes up through there. So you really can't get a good access to it. Okay. I've struggled with this issue far enough. What I'm gonna do is pull these pins out, the bottom pins out. I've got to pull the other one out on the other side. I'm not going to take the spring off. I'm just going to leave it in place. Enough is enough. I'm going to cut them on the truck and do that. So what I'm not going to do, I'm not going to bring the axle over here. I'm going to get these springs cut off on the truck first, then bring the axle over here, because what I'm probably going to cut them off with is a cutoff wheel, or possibly if I can find somebody that's got a target saw, I'll bring a target saw in here, but I don't want the back axle over there exposed to all of the dust and debris that's going to be created by a cutoff wheel or the target saw. So get the lower pins out on the other side, get them all cleaned up. Now what I did is I soaked this and got all of this is a pin from this side. I soaked it, got all of the grease, the old caked in grease that probably you wouldn't have been able to push it through anyways. It was so hard and caked in there that you probably couldn't have gotten new grease into it anyways. So what I did is I soaked it in the parts cleaner and then took a pick and pulled all of that old grease out of there, flushed it out. I'll get a new grease zerk into it. Gonna do the same for the other side. Cut off wheel or target saw, cut these leaf springs off like I wanted to. Bring the rear axle over here and then do the fit up for the airbags or the air suspension. You just got to say enough is enough. This is the problem of getting these pins out. Either set of these pins out has become like the issue that I had with the 1066 getting those wheel wedges out. It took me forever to get them things to break free, and I mean forever. And I'm not going to do it on this one. Okay, I'm over here at the rear end, and what I did is I just cleaned the inside of it out. There was a bunch of oil stuck in the bottom. I pulled that rear or that bottom drain plug out of there, drained out. There was a little bit of water in there. Drained out that, cleaned. This is this large piece over here is a magnet. I'm not sure if you can see it. Let me get a light for you so that you can see it. But that large thing is a magnet, and there was a lot of sludge. There was a lot of sludge buildup around it. So I cleaned it all out. Then I cleaned this face up. Now you got to get some that forma gasket. Gonna stop at Napa after I've got to go to run to the bank and do some things, but I'll stop at Napa, get some of that forma gasket, and get that rear end with the parking brake attached to it back into here, and so that this is set, that I can get it over and behind the truck when I get those springs cut off of there. I just wanted to show you that drain plug. That also has a magnet on it. Now, there was a bunch of sludge around this thing and around that magnet. If you ran it between your fingers, you can't feel anything. It was just sludge. Now, I've got to assume that it's fine metal filings that was created that sludge. But again, if you run it between your fingers, you can't feel metal. It was just sludge. So, but I cleaned it all out. Everything should be good. I've got some new, gonna have new bearings in there. I've got to pull that other side apart. That rotor should be okay, but I'll double check it when I pull it apart. Get the bearings and seals in that side, and I've got to find some new brake shoes for the brakes. The one side is almost brand new, but the other side is well worn. The side that the caliper pushes against wears apparently faster than the other side, so okay, got to get some new brake shoes, and then I'll put the rear end back together. And after I get the springs cut off, take it over to the back side of the truck to get it out of this area so that I can open up some space in here. When I was down to the salvage yard yesterday, I was also talking to them about these two axles, if they wanted them in the tires. I just would hate to see him go to a scrap yard. Me having to take him to a scrap yard to scrap them. There might be somebody out there that could use them, but I'm not going to go through the issue or the hassle of trying to list them on eBay or something like that. But hopefully the salvage yard will take them. Okay, I brought you over here because the engine hoist doesn't really work because the legs are basically the same spacing as those stands that are holding the rear end up, and I can't position it in there. So what I think I'm going to do, lower it down on the floor, take the engine stand out of here, bring the forklift truck over, and try and pick it up with a forklift truck. That way there isn't an interference with the legs of this engine stand, engine hoist, and the stands that are under the rear end. Plan B, I didn't really want to use a forklift because I have issues with the forklift. It lowers down over time, and I'm not going to really I can't really give a good estimate of how long it takes to do this, but that forma gasket stuff for rear end oil or gear oil, it says to put it on and bolt it up as soon as possible, hand tight, then wait an hour and then torque it down. So I really don't know, without having used it before, how much time I have, so I didn't want to be screwing around with a forklift, getting on, picking it up, getting off, etc., etc. I've got some of the bolts caught. I've got to what it is, it's so front heavy now, it rolls it over. So I've got to pick it up with the hoist, get that jack out of there, pick it up with the hoist to get the jack out of there, and then I can maneuver the holes so that they line up on the bottom. Just snugging them hand tight. Well, you know what I mean by hand tight.
I'm just going to do a little voiceover here while I've got some dead audio space. Let's go back to the springs, and I know that I beat a dead horse to death, but some people might be wondering what happens if that spring had been broken and you needed to get that pin out. Well, I could have always cut that pin off and replaced it with a new one, but I don't need to. There's no sense doing it. I'd have to go through the issue of trying and find one, or probably end up making them, but I don't really have to do that. As long as I get those other pins cleaned up, I should be good.
Or torque it. Gonna have to look up the torque spec on it. Okay, I'm over here at the rear axle. I just installed that pumpkin. I still haven't torqued it up. I just looked up the torque value of it, and it's 250 foot-pounds. Those have to be torqued down too. But while I'm kind of waiting for that to cure, I pulled off the drum on this brakes, and as you can see, they put on new pads on the thing. What I was looking for is I've got to figure out how they ran the cable that goes to the emergency or parking brake. Let's not call it an emergency brake, but the parking brake. It actually apparently goes into a hole back here and comes out, and I'm going to have to get in there with a small flashlight, look for it. But in the meantime, I just wanted to pull it off and kind of show you guys what it was. So there it is. The parking brake has been installed. I've still got to change this. At some point in time, this thing is going to have to be changed because this yoke is way too small for this axle drivetrain situation. So apparently it was off of a lower powered vehicle or less weight, or didn't have the capacity to it. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Hit that like button, subscribe.